city having a property tax credit for owner-occupied homes? And would you support such a credit in the city of Medford?
Having a owner-occupied tax credit, it makes a lot of sense. It's absolutely, definitely worth looking into. The city of Somerville has an owner-occupied up to 35%, which they charge non-homeowner occupiers, and that represents 68% to the homeowners in Somerville. 68% of the homeowners in Somerville get that 35%. Now, here in the city of Medford, we've had this discussion come up on a few times, and what's happened, and that is that some of my colleagues on the council feel that if you were going to go to owner-occupied, whether it be 5, 10, or 15%, and that's what you're going to be saving because you'd be getting the out-of-towners would be paying, the non-owner occupiers would be paying for it, they felt that the transfer over to approximately 500 to 600 homes in this community would be paying the difference. We never really had a legitimate, deep-down discussion as it relates to this particular matter. There are, I believe, 5 or 6 communities right now that do have it, and it seems to work. The unfortunate part about it is, even if you wanted to have it, the Department of Revenue is going to have to make that final decision. Likewise, the Massachusetts State Legislature will be looking at it because this is an issue that seems to be coming up. I think as Councilor Burke, I think, was on the council at the time, and I think she offered something to change a letter or a terminology in the law that could possibly give us that opportunity to go forward with that. So I think it's something definitely that needs to be looked at. It should be looked at. Anything that can help the taxpayers here in this community, the majority of the taxpayers, so be it. And likewise, you know, it is not true. I never voted to transfer more of a cost to the commercial side by giving it to the residential. That's not true. When you look at the commercial people in this community, they're paying a very high tax. It's almost double that of residential. That needs to be looked at too. It needs to be fair and equitable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Penta. 2 minutes to Mr. Keating.
Thank you very much, John. Actually, Council Penta referred to something that I offered several years ago when I was a city councilor. One word in the Mass General Law could change the way that this entire exemption works. Right now, it's a flat amount that is considered the exemption, the owner-occupied exemption, and that whether it be, say, a $40,000 figure. If you owned a $200,000 home, $40,000 would go against you, and if you owned a $900,000 home, the same $40,000 would be against your assessment. Therefore, there's a break-even point where those that own homes, value of homes, doesn't mean your income level, value of homes over a certain threshold would be paying more, and if you were owner-occupied with a value less, you would pay less. That's a class war about owner-occupied parcels, and that's why I offered the amendment. And believe me, I will offer that amendment again. I went up to Beacon Hill, I spoke on behalf of the legislation that I proposed, the amendment that would have tweaked that to make it a proportionate exemption, and therefore every owner-occupied person would have benefited from that. And it basically went to study, which we all know in the audience what study means. It goes nowhere. So that will be offered again. We do have all of the facts and figures from the assessor's office on how that would impact our taxes and how many owner-occupied parcels that we could project to have. So we do have all the information necessary to put that in place. I think it's definitely something that we should look into. I've supported in the past. I believe Council Penta has as well. But I've offered legislation to try and change it so that it makes sense for all owner-occupied parcels. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cheney-Bird. And one follow-up to you, Mr. Penta.
The interesting point about this is a perfect example of why and how the community should be involved. This is what the idea of transparency is all about. This should be the idea of letting everybody know and have an interest in it. If you folks have a piece of property, whether it's commercial or residential, you should be informed as to what it is. If the city council wants to bring it up, okay, that's all well and good. But they have a responsibility back to you. That's why on many occasions people say to me, why do I talk about something? Why do I keep bringing it up and this and that? Because I'm just waiting sometimes for people to come forward and say, you know, this is a good idea, or if it isn't a good idea, we don't get to that. And the classic example with the kiosk, the taxpayers of this community had no opportunity to come in and discuss it, and neither did the 4 business squares. And as a result of that, we're stuck with a program, a kiosk program, that's just causing a whole bunch of problems here in this community. If you had open transparency and you had open council meetings and you had open meetings throughout this community on that, you would have had a better idea how it would work, how it should work, and if it was going to continue to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Since we've diverted to parking, it went before the City Council in multiple public hearings. It had committee of the whole, which is publicized, open to the public. It had a vote to send out a request for proposals for parking companies, which was voted unanimously by the city council. It then also went back to the city council because the mayor's only obliged to do a 3-year contract by law. Had to go back to the city council to get authorization to expand that to a 7-year contract. So I agree that the public needs to play a role in everything that happens in our city, and they need to have a voice at it. But these were public hearings conducted by the city council. And now back to your question about the tax rate, is that the city council is the ones that can pass the residential exemption. And I'm glad that it hasn't passed thus far because it's an inequity for certain homeowners that have higher valued homes in our community. They could be our seniors that are living on fixed income, but they've owned their home for 50, 60 years. So with that being said, that is why I don't believe it's been passed, but if we can make that amendment, whether through home rule or a legislation change, then I fully support that and have in the history of my city council days. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question goes to Ms. Muccini Burke first, and the question is, there are vacant and abandoned buildings in Medford that are a source of urban blight and life safety concerns. Will this issue be a priority of your administration, and how can the issue be addressed?
Any area that is slums and blight has to be addressed in our community. We can't put a blind eye to those types of facilities. I know when you go through Medford Square, we see some storefronts that are vacant. We need to aggressively pursue businesses that we want in our community to bring to our square. I think that's very important. And I think we both agree on that the OCD office has to be augmented. We need more staffing in that department. And we will probably go to the end on Tuesday saying that same comment. It's just how do we get the staffing within the current structure that we have under the Proposition 2.5, which was a general law that said you can only raise the taxes by 2.5% plus new growth. So with that being said, we need to find the funds in order to do these services for our community. And that strictly falls in our community development office. But then now back it up, if we do something like the Salem Partnership, where we have all the stakeholders at the table with a vested interest in seeing our community be the best it can, then we have another group of people that are out there talking to business owners, talking to the people on what they really want in the community, and then reaching out through their network. So I think it's very important that we implement a group like that, their job is to create economic development, beautification, and bring things to the forefront of what we need to do to make Medford the best it can be. I happen to love this city, obviously. We both chose to live here. You all chose to live here. We're committed to seeing Medford be the best that it can be, and that's because of our love for this community. And if there are some blighted properties, we need to address them. We need to get them safe so that kids aren't hanging out in them, and then we need to move forward with a plan for rehabilitating them, bringing in tax increment financing if we have to give people tax breaks in order to put the work in and work with our Attorney General and our District Attorney's Office on getting some of the funding in order to take over some of the properties that might be in foreclosure or neglected. Thank you.
During this past summer and coming into the fall, my wife and I walked all the squares in this community, and we basically knocked on almost all the doors for those that were there. First of all, the question was asked, did you ever hear of the Office of Community Development? Have you ever seen anybody come in there? And the answer was, what? Have you ever seen anything from the city administration, the mayor, or otherwise? Nope. You know what they heard? The only time we ever got something from City Hall was when they were looking for a fundraiser and looking for a contribution. That, to me, sent a spark out there to turn around and say, for the past 28 years, how can you talk about leadership that works when you're not even out there meeting the people that you should be meeting? Now, empty storefronts should not be places for people to put political signs and say that that's where we're going. It shouldn't be. What it should be a mandate to the administration to know we've got a little bit of a problem here and we need to do it. If we didn't have these private investors coming into our community and letting us know that they're willing and telling us why they're coming in here, then we'd have no idea. So the city has never done anything on its own. There's private people coming in. Maybe they see an opportunity. Medford Square Gran Gusto just came in there, took over where Book Bestsellers Cafe was. He put an awful lot of money into that place, just like Salvatore's, just like Carol's have. But you have to understand something. You need something to bring them in. The great debate that took place on October 15th brought in over 1,000 people. Both Salvatore's and Carol's were full after that debate because they had a reason to come to the square. We have 5 total squares altogether. That's what we need to work on. We need to have an administration that recognizes all these squares, get the most we can get out of our people, and if we have to hire more people, then that's it. As I said before, if you don't spend any money, you'll never know what you're capable of. So we have $6.5 million in free cash, and I think it's about time we start looking at how we can spend that money better for the people of this community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I also believe that we need to go out and get the most grants that we're capable of getting, and again, that comes down to staffing. Right now, many department heads are getting their own grants, putting together packages, working with partners from the state level as well to try and get granting opportunities. We had a pretty significant grant just a few years ago that would have gone toward a garage in Medford Square. And that wasn't strictly to be for the everyday parking that was going on there. It was for the future of the square so that economic development, apartments could go above some of the units so that there'd be parking available for them. So some of the things that we have to do is not only get the grants, but then implement the grants and put the money to work, because it'll pay for itself 20, 30 times itself over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. So we do have to make an investment. We have to invest in our community development office, and we need to see the money, create more money, and that's what it will do. Bring in some grant money, and it's going to prosper. We're going to increase our tax revenues, and we're also going to see businesses thrive in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Next, 1 minute follow-up, Ms. Pence.
Talking about the proposed parking garage that would be behind Colleen's, that would give you a net of no more than 40 parking spaces for approximately $9 million. So what you have there, and for $9.5 million, you're going to get no more than 40 additional parking spaces. Now, while that was all at the same time being discussed before the council, the city spent $100,000 for a report on downtown Medford Square as well as parking garage. And at that point in time, the report indicated that the city of Medford was only, the downtown area was only at 65% of its capacity at prime time. The council, at that point in time, I believe you needed 5 votes, and there was only 4 available at that time, potentially 4. I can't speak for everyone. But the fact of the matter is, you had a pending lawsuit, because once that building was going up, the residential apartment building next to where the garage would go was all set to bring suit. So if they were all set to bring suit, now the city is looking at A, parking garage, $9 million, only for 40 parking spaces. We just spent $100,000 to tell you only have 65% capacity. It wasn't a go at the time. Thank you.
After we go out format, the next question will begin with Mr. Penta. And the question is, would your administration organize city departments any differently? And if you intend to add positions, what would they be and how would you fund them?
The first thing I would do differently is, upon taking office on the first day, I would go through each department, make myself known to each person working in the building, in all the buildings, as a matter of fact. And then subsequent to that, we would have department head meetings. And what we would have, that's novel, department head meetings. What we would do is we would have some department head meetings, and they would be held accountable to make sure that they're there at 8:30 in the morning, not 8:45, 9 or 9:15, and come and go as you please. You know, these department heads are making a pretty good salary, anywhere from $90,000 to in excess of $100,000 a year. That's a lot of money in today's day and age. So with that being said, they're going to be held accountable for what needs to take place. This is a new day dawn here in the city of Medford. This isn't going to be business as usual as it's been for the last 28 years. You're going to work for the people of this community because they're paying your salary. And because they're paying your salary, the job needs to get done. It's going to be done courteously, and if it's not done courteously, then there's going to be consequences to pay. That's number 1. Number 2, I would bring my department heads in as it relates to certain particular issues that I have a concern about. A, the police department. We're going to get together, we're going to sit down, and we're going to meet with the city council, and we're going to meet with certain department heads, and we will meet with the police department and their personnel. And then we're going to take a walk around the entire location where the police department is located, inclusive of the fire department. Because this is a real major issue, like they did in the city of Malden. And when Malden went forward to build a brand new police station, they've already received $9 million in grants, $9 million toward their $18 million police station. So we have some work to do. But it's not monumental. It's not over the top. It's work. And what's wrong with going to work when you're getting paid for it? Isn't that what you're supposed to do? That's the way I was brought up. You go to work every day, you do your job, you'll be rewarded. The reward here is taking care of the taxpayers, giving them something for their money. making your life become productive and letting the taxpayer know when they call City Hall, walk into that building, any department, any person, they're going to be treated respectfully and courteously. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manta. And 2 minutes to Mr. Sheehan.
Thank you very much, John. I likewise think that City Hall should be structured in a different format. I think there are several departments that a lot of the services overlap and they can work really well together. So we see that with the Office of Community Development, DPW, engineering. They work collectively along with procurement. Those are 3 great departments that should all be in the same location in the building and should be working cooperatively in a more open fashion. Likewise, we have Health, Veterans, Council on Aging. That's a cluster of departments that really reach out to the community to do what's best for the community's health and safety. So I think that those should become a cluster. So there are several of those little clusters that I think could be created within the building to make it more efficient and to have more input collectively. But ultimately, it has to be the year that's a part of what is going on with each and every department. And that does require meetings. That requires roundtables. That requires the police department, the fire chief to be sitting at a table informing us of what's going on in our community, what do we need to be aware of, what the hot trends that are happening with drugs and public safety. We need to be aware of that. So those are really important things that I think can be accomplished. And then it's also then reaching out to the public to find out what is important to you. So over in Mayoral, I referenced the Resi Staff program. Let me explain what that is. It's basically Mayor Curtone and his team go into wards, one by one. They bring all the statistics of what's going on in the community, fights, vandals, robberies, all of that information, projects that are going to be coming down the pike. They sit with the people find out what's going on, and then people give feedback of what they think is important and what needs to be addressed. And then what happens the next quarter? You go back up and you update them. You tell them what was accomplished over the last 3 months, that now people can see that we're doing things, that we're listening, we're reacting, and we're doing things that are good for the community. So I think those are some important things that I'd like to implement in my new administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCheney-Burke. And that leads us to a 1-minute follow-up for you, Mr. Penta.
One of the things I would do is revise the whole budget process that we have here in the city. This is not budget. Looked at the last 4 to 5 years. Has been cut budget by 5%, cut budget by 5%, increase budget by 2.5% from taxes and all that. This is the time to work on it. This is by each and every single department head. Their requirement is to come in and give us their wish list as to how their department can work better, how can it merge better, give us a cost breakdown, and tell us when we present that budget to your local council for approval. It's open for discussion. We don't have any of this stuff. This is not the city council resolution list year in and year out. And for the last 4 or 5 years, we've asked for it. This past budget cycle was extremely unlikely. When 4 people in the department heads came forward and said that they submitted their budget list, wish list, but they never got communicated to us because they were told not to tell us. That's not going to happen anymore. They are going to tell us, and they're going to be required to do a comprehensive budget proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Penta. Ms. Burke, 1-minute follow-up to you.
Thanks, Ron. There's actually the programming that we use in the finance department. We can create a budget. And it can an automated budget can be stood out and it gives all the detail of the actuals that we spent over however many years people would like to see them. That's something that I would like to implement. I know it exists. I know how it can be useful. But I, as a chief executive officer, that will be shared and that will be out there at every budget meeting. Likewise, sitting down to the capital plan, which to me is the wish list, that's where it comes into place. It's very important to have the input of not only the department heads, but the people and people who use the services, so that we know what are the needs of this community. So I really place such great importance on the capital plan because it is a roadmap for our community. It will spell out our priorities and when we can accomplish them, how we can pay for them. A lot goes into how we put the budget together because we have, it's not infinite dollars that come in for taxes. We need to work within a certain makeup of dollars and revenue. And obviously we rely on the state, which has been cutting us for the last 8, 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCheney-Burke. The next question, we will begin with you, Ms. McCheney-Burke. And the question is the City of Medford doing enough to meet the demands for affordable housing and the needs of veteran housing?
to meet those demands. I think that we need to get an inclusionary zoning ordinance on the books, and what that does is basically a mandate that when new projects come into your community, they need to incorporate a certain percentage of affordability to every project that they work on. I think that goes a long way in reaching some of the goals that we'd like to reach. That would obviously take working with our city council in order to change that ordinance and put it into place. But I think that should be a priority for this community to have in place. There are also other means above and beyond the mandate where it is electable. And that's where sometimes you can do it through tax agreements, offering more density on the project, or possibly giving up, maybe you don't need as many parking because you're going to be on a commuter line, and you don't need to have the same parking that someone that lives in a neighborhood needs. So there are things you can do to entice affordability, and those are two avenues that you can go down. And I think if we start to travel down that road, we will see great outcomes. Plus, we'll see prosperous buildings going up, and that's great for people to work. That's very important to this community as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Muccini-Burke. Mr. Penta, 2 minutes to you. Is the city of Medford doing enough to meet the demands for affordable housing and veterans housing?
One of the things, this is like a similar question that was brought up at the Chamber of Commerce debate. We talked about seniors and housing and stuff like that. A perfect example would be with another one was in where trust is a company or a business called King, right? Sports, bar, restaurant, situation. And the question was brought up when I was asking them, how would you feel about having an inclusive area that has not only veterans, but also has handicapped people, and it also handicaps single parents, mom and dad, all inclusive in an area that's easily accessible not only to the highway but also to the public transportation. How would you feel about that? And overall, most of the areas basically came down, they had no problem with it, they thought it would be great because they thought it would be a life incentive for those folks who would be living there. We've never explored that. This illustration is yet to explore anything in that particular area. That's what I would intend to do. Go out there and try to see something like that, that type of development, that type of an inclusion. And now we talk about affordable housing. Some folks will not come into this community because under affordable housing, you have to give up 25% of your housing. And that goes toward the housing stock requirement. I think it's 7.8%. The requirement for the state would make 10%. I don't even know where they come up with these numbers. But all I can tell you is this: if you come in and you build an affordable housing project, then you should get credit for the entire affordable housing project. Because you're only getting 25% because that's the inclusion. It goes into the development, it goes into a particular area. So that goes back to 1939, the state legislature in the town of Brookline, because it's a legislature out there that you can see what we're going to get to it. Have people come in, we'll give them 25% of whether they're going to build all the affordable housing, and that's how they're going to be. That needs to be looked at on the state level. But locally, the city needs to have a review as to the type of housing it wants, the type of development it wants, and how it can be inclusive of all age groups. Thank you.
Thank you. 1 minute follow-up for you, Ms. Muccini-Burke.
Thank you very much. I also think there's an opportunity that we're seeing the potential for the Green Line coming to, if it could possibly get funded to Route 16, that we can see some inclusionary housing and put into some of the facilities that are down there. We realize that we walk in court that's pretty close by to that area, and it could be an opportunity to redo that entire facility with better affordable housing, afforded to our veterans as well, that meet the criteria in order to go in there, so that we can produce housing opportunities. The state can say you have a goal and you need to reach 10%. That's really insignificant to the person that needs housing at that time. They don't care if we're at 10 or 15%. They need someplace that they can live and they can afford to live. And it's the difference between affordable housing and housing that's affordable. I mean, we all have, well, I know I have a young man in my home that is 27 and he's looking to buy a house. And it's almost outrageous the prices that we're seeing in our community. So we also need to be able to help do some specials with some of the local banks that want to give back to the community to see if we can implement some structure that will allow our youngsters to stay in our community and prosper here.
Thank you. Yep. That's fine. Mr. Penta, 1 minute follow-up.
An issue with inclusionary housing is take the Route 16. Let's get to that issue of the Green Line, from small town to Route 16. It just can't happen overnight. It's $150, $150 million right now cost. What you really need is you need a study. You need a study to figure out what is the government's commitment to the state's commitment. They're already bidding over just to get to College Avenue. That's number one. You're gonna have a loss of taxes down there, and you're gonna have a loss of business. And if you have a loss of business, a loss of taxes, you're gonna have people going out of job. You're gonna be moving 3 bridges, you're gonna have to displace 3 bridges. And housing is gonna be proposed at the end of Route 16 by the Metropolitan Area Planning Council for 150 units. So folks living in West Medford will now be saddled with people coming from Cambridge and Arlington and other areas to park in their particular area to get onto the green line in that particular area. There's been no proven track record that housing is going to satisfy the needs, and that's the reason why we need to go from College Ave to Route 16. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Penta. And the next question, we'll begin with Mr. Penta. What innovative ideas, economic or otherwise, would you introduce with the new administration? 2 minutes to you, sir.
An interesting idea would be, I learned something in this class that I taught this past Monday, and I really think that if you go there and you make a presentation, whether it be from kindergarten to the secondary or to the high school, and you present an idea and see how they expand upon it. Like any one given day, any idea could just mushroom. Do I have one particular idea in mind right now? I don't see nothing to tell you no. But my best idea is that I'm going to sit down with my department head, and we're going to discuss things that I am presenting as part of my mental plan for the community. I presented the plan as to how I think the city should move forward. And I want the city to move forward on that particular plan by having them become inclusionary. To have our city council, to have our department heads, and to have our people within our community understand what the plan is all about. And if they're accepting it, they want to be a part of it, so be it. You want to add to it, you want to cut from it. If you don't want to be a part of it, that's okay. But you have to have a plan to start with something. I've had a plan since the day I made my announcement. I have 18 characteristics in my plan that I intend to address. And because of that, that has presented an overwhelming response from the people that I met during this campaign, who have been not only supportive, but they like the idea. And they've also given me additional ideas as it relates to make it more beneficial. Over and beyond that, ideas that they might have. You know, if you don't talk about something, and what you want to propose, you're never going to know what the reaction is going to be. And if I was just to sit here and look at you and say, okay, you give me an idea and I'll think about it, that's no good either. I have a plan, I'm presenting it, I think it's a motivating plan, and I think it can be well respected by the people who want to look at the plan, because I will respect people who like to return. And that's what compromise is all about. And that's what transparency is all about. And that's what openness is all about. And that's what our city of Medford is going to be all about. Thank you.
Again, the question is, what innovative ideas, economic or otherwise, would you introduce with the new administration? Ms. Muccini-Burke, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. I think what may not be too innovative, but I think it goes a long way, is to review the way services are delivered to our community. We've worked with the UMass Boston program, and they come in and they actually analyze how are things happening, how are you doing it, what do you need to accomplish to make it, number one, more efficient and get the job done. So I think a full review of the delivery service in this community is very important for us to do immediately. That's something that has to take place so that we can move forward, and it will also save us money. I also think that we need to bring in something like a sale partnership. I think that's an innovative idea. It's not my idea, but it's a great idea, and it is accomplishing a lot in Salem. And I think that if we implement something like that, we will see lots of lofty goals, and we'll see things put into place. We'll see implementation of plans. So I think that's also something that I think would be a fabulous idea. From an economic development point of view, I've met with so many business owners over the past few months, and they all tell me the same thing. We need to streamline the permit process. It takes us so long to get to City Hall, and then sometimes we're at the end, we think we've covered all the bases, we've visited every department, and then we go and we find out that we needed one more piece of paper in order to get things done. We just saw that with Shanghai restaurant on Salem Street. They thought they did everything right, but when it came down to the last hour, they had missed a step. So things need to be streamlined. We need to have regular meetings, open houses on Wednesday when City Hall's open. Bring the businesses in so they know what has to happen. Checklists have to be put into place. So there's a multitude of things that we can do to make it easier for you to get things done in our city. And then secondly, just a little thing, I want to bring back the senior